My name is Ivar Hillesland, and I am the pastor at Church of the Apostles in Seattle, and I'm going to be talking about the life cycle of organizations model. And I'd like to begin with a little reading from Ecclesiastes. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes round to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. It's a place where the streams flow, where they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. As soon as you're born, you start to die. And I'm done. Part of the thing when talking about the life cycle organizations is the basic fact that everything decays. Nothing stays the same. You can't just sit and live forever. Everything decays. So understanding this is really important. So I drew a house. Let's just imagine for an instant that my wife and I wanted to buy a house, and so we came up with some idea of what we wanted a house. We were like, we want it to look like a child drew it. And so we found a space that was affordable 100 miles out of Seattle to get to it, to find that. And we came up with this plan for a house, and we built it, and we moved in, and it was great. We had this house, but we had to do some work to keep it going, and we had this idea of what we wanted in here, so we mowed the lawn. We wanted to add some things to it, so just understanding what we wanted, we decided, let's build a little picket fence, and we'll put that in front. It only had 3 things on it, and that was it, but that was enough for us. We wanted the dormers, so we were like, let's put a dormer up here, those are cool. So we added a dormer. We wanted to be hipsters, so we put those big steel letters above our door that people put, and some of those boards with that wood paneling. We wanted some nice drapes. We wanted to make it look nice, so we took care of our house, and we put a lot of attention to that. But over time, we got tired of it, and we were just like, you know what, we're good now. Let's just sit with what we got. And the grass started growing long, and it was this colored grass, because that's the color pen I have. So the grass grew long, and I was like, I don't want to mow the lawn. Mowing the lawn sucks. And it started coming up to the cracks in the cement. Someone broke our window, and I was like, I'll fix that some other time. The roof, some animals moved in. There's a hole in here. It's like a raccoon family. This is a raccoon. See it? That's a raccoon, or Pikachu, or some other thing, Pokemon. The shrubs, blackberry bushes came in, started taking over everything, and the rats moved in and started eating stuff. And we had a fire here, and we just gave up on this part of the house. And things were falling off the sides. And it basically just started looking like that. So then we got to this point where we're like, you know what? Remember when we used to take lots of care of our house? It's going to be a lot of work now. Should we just start working at this? What can we do to make our house return to the form that it was once? And at this point we realized that we're just too far gone. There's nothing we can do. Our house was just decayed to the point where we had to take a bigger measure here. And so we decided that, we called in the person we worked with when we built the house, and he was like, I can work on this, but it's better if you just tear the whole thing down and start from scratch and build something new, maybe make it boxy like all those other new houses around. So, another joyful story, this house. If we had spent the time continually to take care of this house, the process would have been easier, right? We were in a process of mowing the lawn, trimming the bushes, making it look nice, being attentive to what we thought of as our house. But as time went, if we let go of this and don't pay any attention, by itself, because things just decay, the house is going to start getting worse and worse. And the farther along we get, the harder and harder it would be for us to get back to that original state of having a house that looks like a child's drawing of a house. Which moves me to this wonderful model. That's not it. That's a blank piece of paper. The life cycle of organizations, taking into account that we all are born and we all die. So, I didn't mean to smile when I said die, but I did. So all of our ministries in our churches begin with a birth. Some founder, someone had an idea of this ministry, of the importance of this ministry, and had a thought of what they wanted to be and where they wanted to do this. So everything begins with birth, and as we move along, we figured out the ways, the identity pieces of who we are as a community. So who are we? Like, what are we going to be as a church, different from other churches? Where are we going to be? Who is our neighbor, and how are we going to serve our neighbor? What does that look like? And what are we going to do as an institution? So the formation piece of the church is that time where we really are thinking about the vision and identity pieces of our community, who we are. And as we continue working on that and building on that, we can move as a community into a healthy community, one that has programming, that has good relationships built up, that has a management that can deal with the church and make everything run smoothly and give people the opportunity to be brought into our community and find transformation within our community. But over time in some of our churches, we can too easily rest in that area without the work needed to keep it fresh. And so even though we might have the stability of a healthy, successful church, a church that has grown and has been in this great place, if we are not attentive to it, things can start to become stagnant and stale if we are not continuing to ask questions about who we are and what we're doing. And just when we think that everything is going great and that we don't need to do anything because things do decay and over time, we will end up in this place if we are not doing anything to help stop that movement. Over time, if we continue to neglect our community and those questions we need to be asking about our formation, the church will decline, programming will start to decrease, people will lose the vision and understanding about who we are and what we actually are doing as a church. The management will be too big for what it's already been doing. It'll be the wrong fit for what programming is happening in the community. Relationships will start to degrade. There'll be distrust. And as we keep going further and further and let this continue, then it'll disintegrate into a place where the relationships are definitely broken. There is no vision. There's no idea of where we're going to be. There's a sense of hopelessness within the community. We're not sure we're going to make it. We have things that we do as a community that may not fit what our original visions were when we were founded as a community. There is a mismatch between our original story and what our story is now. And then if we continue further, the community will die. It'll eventually get to the point where it is not sustainable and does not have a reason to exist any longer. The good news is we always have a way to stop this process and keep our communities continually refreshing themselves so that we don't end up going down here. All of our churches, all of our communities, all of our organizations, all of our ministries are always on this trajectory. They're born at some point. We have a firm understanding of who we are and what we're going to do. And as time goes on, those things will decay if we don't devote the attention needed to intervene in that, to create a system where we can continually be asking those questions so important to our formation and identity. Vision is the first thing to go in this process. And we can get systems in place that will manage to keep our organization going and going and going. And it becomes easy for us to do that. It becomes route. And then we forget that we had a real reason behind why we did those things to begin with. So at any stage in this process, there is a way out. But the further you get this way, the more energy is required to get back to this point of formation. Think of that house. The amount of energy required at the end when the raccoons are living in the roof and everything else. Once it had gotten to this point, the amount of work required to get back to here is a massive amount. Whereas in the beginning, when we were constantly working on our house, mowing the lawn, keeping it up, it was a small amount of work, but it kept it continually in this category. And communities need to often decide at this point whether it's more work to try to come back here or whether death is actually the best solution. So what this might look like in a community here is looking at those different ways, listening processes in our community to figure out where we're at. Ask people, what is the vision? What is the mission of this place? Who are we? And if they do not know that, then we can have a process to answer that and talk about that community, who we are. We can develop ways of regularly checking in on what our ministries are, how the leadership looks, if it's the right fit for the size of our congregation. Just different processes in place from our leadership team and the people to keep this going in our community. If we've gotten, so this is called ongoing renewal, if we've gotten to a point where it's starting to get stale and stagnant, we're not sure we're stuck in this community, it's still stable, we're not losing everyone yet, but we just don't have that sense of life and animation within our community, we need a little more than that ongoing renewal. We need a little revitalization. So this takes a little bit more energy, a little more intentionality about how we are going to address our community and what process we might have. So we might have a more drastic listening process, a community meeting where we really mark out where we are as a community, look at it together and figure out a way forward. We might invite someone in from to consult with us from the consultant network. We might send some people to the college. We might do a way to get in this to figure out a better way to intervene in the system and give us a project that we can work on to bring us back to those important forming questions of who we are, what we're about, and what we're doing. If we waited a little longer, so our church is truly in decline, the members are leaving, our ministries are breaking down, there are tensions within the community, we may need a little more. We may need redevelopment as a community. And this could be from within. This may be a new call of a new leadership in your church, a new pastor or priest. This may be hiring someone to come in and consult with the community. This is a much more serious intentionality, and there's an acknowledgement here that things aren't going well. In order to redevelop, the church has to acknowledge we are in this place, and we want to come back to this place where we know who we are as a community and can work on that. And if we've let it decline even further down to disintegration, it's almost broken apart. There are people fighting. Leadership is not trusted. If we're in this place so close to death here, we absolutely need someone from the outside. We are not healthy enough as a system to help our own selves in this way. We need someone from the outside to come in and do this work for us and help us out. And often this is where the diocese will come in and act on behalf of the community. This can also be a serious place of conversations around whether this is worth that energy and effort. Could it be that by letting our church die, we might free up funds for some other ministry, that we might be more honest about who we are as a community? Maybe we don't match our neighborhood anymore at all, and the demographics completely changed. These are important questions in all these parts of it, but especially here, we can ask those questions, really weigh it against what this death means for us, and whether that can provide space for the birth of a new ministry or some other form of ministry in our community. So one way, if I was in a room full of lots of people to use this, it would be to ask people to come up within your community. This is a way of doing some data collection and mark where they think they are on this. Do they think their community is in decline, or they are in this process from decline towards re-engaging formation? Do they think they're in is stagnant, things just don't feel right, but they are working on it? Or maybe they just really feel hopeless and are here. So this could be one way to get a sense. So people in our community, often what we do when we collect data is to be able to collect it all together as a community. We may be able to, especially when you're getting down to these parts, we can look at it, everyone sees it together, and we can analyze the own data that we've given ourselves as a community and reflect on where we think we are at. And we can find a way forward and figure out are there outliers? Do all of us feel right here? And is there a few people that just feel like this place is awful? What does that say about our community? Who are those people, and how are we going to address the ministry to those folk? Or vice versa. Everyone thinks it's really, this place is done, but there's someone who's up here who's like, this is the best church I've ever been to. It's so great. Someone who likes conflict, maybe, who knows? So this is a really easy way to get a good gauge of where we're at, especially in leadership on the vestry. You can ask them as a vestry to figure out, so we can take a pulse of our understanding of where our community is at. All right, so I want to get at 3 important points of this through a couple pictures here. First of all, this friendly frog represents change here. And you've often heard, this frog's gonna die, just to let you know from the front. You've often heard that a frog in a boiling pot of water, if you just turn that heat up slowly, it will never notice it, and it'll cook, and then no more froggy. Change happens. And if you, as a community, it can be hard to notice when things are going on. I'm going to cover that up so you're not so sad. Quit looking so sad as I look at the frog. So in a community, we often don't have the eyes to see. We can be blind to the change happening around us as we go on. Decay is happening. But so we rely on our leadership especially to have a vision towards our community and towards the environment to help gauge where we're at. Are we boiling? Are we getting to that point where we are cooked and we need to do something about it? So change, we are blind to change, and it's useful to have some kind of system in place, some process, so that we are constantly checking ourselves to make sure that we're moving the right way. I'm sorry, Froggy. Time and size. In the forest, it takes a long time for a big tree to grow. And it takes up all the sunlight up here, and it doesn't get down here. A fern, the seed grows far faster than this tree. It grows, it sprouts really quickly, it has a short lifespan, and it dies. And it's just a different style of life. Our churches, the church capital C, are these big monolithic things that take a long time, but we have lots of ministries in our communities that are quick, they start, and they die soon. So this is not just applying to our church as a whole, but there are certain ministries in our community that we need to think of as being more like the fern. Growing quick, it has its power and purpose, but you can't make this into a long-lasting tree sometimes. That's something we try to do. So like when I showed up at my own church, we had an evening Vespers service every Wednesday night. And there were about 2 to 3 people that would come to it, including myself. And we met for about half a year until I said, you know what? I think this fern's going to die. This is not worth all of our time. We can do better than this and free up more time to do some other ministry that might be more important at a time. Sometimes this is a Bible study or small group that has been living and generating a lot of energy within the community. But you don't want it to live past when forming a clique in the community. It may need to die. You might build that in. So some of our ministries, we just need to be mindful of that there is a life cycle to them, and that is completely normal and healthy. And there's no reason we cannot let certain ministries die in order to give birth to new ministries and free up more energy to do other things. Also, I find it really helpful when thinking of this model and looking at the formation part of it, to be thinking in terms of gravity and energy, as if this were the formation of the model. And that what we do is, as we want to bring people back along, all the way back from disintegration across to formation again, that where the energy is created for that gravitational force is within the formation. So asking those questions of identity and vision, of really knowing what we're about and who we are, being central. What are the stories of our place? What do they say? And how can we emphasize those stories in order to create that kind of energy and the gravity that will pull our community back in on itself so it can do God's work and be sent out? So some key points about this. One, organizations, like organisms, have a natural life cycle. It's just a fact of life. Everything has a life cycle. It's born and it dies, and that is completely okay. Leadership can intervene and return this to the formation there. That the leadership, we don't have to give in to the fact that everything will die, that we can do something, that we can create a system so that our things, our church, our ministries are continually asking the questions that need to be asked so that we are continuing to be healthy and sustainable ministries. To maintain the state of vibrancy and health, all organizations require some form of intervention. If we don't intervene, it will go the way of decay. We have to be acting. The amount of energy required correlates to the distance from formation. So it's less energy for us to be working from a healthy point of view to continually stay as a healthy community. And the further we get from that point, the more energy is required of us to get back to that healthy place. So it does good to always be thinking of systems, even when we really don't think we need it, to always be thinking of how we are asking the questions of who we are, what our stories are, and why that's important to us. This model can also apply to just about anything, not just a single congregation. So as I said, the ministries within our context, you can think of it in terms of a marriage. When you're married, there are certain healthy things you do. We can think, we can think, you know what? In order to keep our marriage in the spot, let's go on a date. Every night, Wednesday night of the week, we're gonna go on a date. We can think of other ways to do that. We may be getting to a point where we're like, let's go see a therapist together. This could be in this category, it could be anywhere. Let's do work on this together and some intentionality around that. You could get to a point where you might need to ask the question of whether this marriage is going to work or not at all. There's a more serious intervention in that. So we can apply this life cycle model to any areas in our own life, in different ministries, our own prayer practices, whatever we want to think about. This is a helpful way to figure out where we're at, to take that to figure out what that says about where we're at, and to figure out what the best solution would be in response. And lastly, resurrection is a thing. So the hopelessness of death, this is, my own church is in the building of a church that died, and we are eternally grateful for the ministry of that place. But they had come to this point and had voted that that building was no longer the right place for them. They sold it, they moved in with another church, they joined up. We believe in life after death, and we believe that life can bring us from any of these places back to the formation place where we are able to express the gospel and share what we believe is life-changing news with other people. So resurrection is a thing, and it's important to remember that. Anything any of you would like to add to any of that? Any questions? This can be used, as I did over here, for some assessment, diagnosis of our community. We can figure out where we're at and think about what that means as we respond to that data. It can be used for teaching and formation, though not, I wouldn't put a strong check, but so I'm going to just put it like to the side a little bit. I think it can be a useful tool, especially equipping people in their own lives. But I probably wouldn't have a teaching class and talk about this specifically with my community to empower them in that way. Data collection. We hypothetically did that a minute ago, as we imagined putting X's on there. Development of common language. I would say only in the sense that we would do this on leadership, but not as a community. So I'm not going to put a check there. Leadership and strategy, absolutely. We can look at where we're at, take the temperature, and figure out where we're going. Direction, vision, and goals. It's all about vision and formation, and it can help us figure out how we best achieve those goals. What is the right method? How do we need to intervene in this to make it work? Anything else? I'm Ivar Hillesland, and that was Life Cycles of an Organization.